On Business This Week, we now have Environmental Affairs Minister Edna Molewa joining us for our People, Power and the Environment slot tonight. And of course, it's COP21 week and the Paris talks continue there. We've got issues in South Africa to talk about too. Welcome, Minister. I have to say that Sandton's been very crowded.
It's extremely crowded.
And it's all your fault.
It's actually not a fault. Let's rejoice over this.
We can.
Yeah.
But you've got a blue dress on, blue light brigades, but even so you battled the traffic.
Terrible.
Today.
I think even with double blue lights, it's still terrible. Those who are having these many cars with blue lights, it's just very busy.
Yep.
I mean, I've come from the airport side. It just took me more than an hour. A trip that takes me normally 30 minutes in a blue light.
Yeah.
Well, we really hope with all the infrastructure that's happening in and around that a couple of years from now it will be even easier. So you will smooth in and out from the airport and
especially because we'll be in a train, in Gautrain.
Absolutely, yep. Absolutely. But it's an important week on the environmental front. And perhaps let's start off with COP21. We know COP17 originating here in South Africa. Maybe, Minister, just give us a sense of what have been the achievements thus far? Because there's a lot of naysayers who are saying they're not seeing the outcomes of these conferences. What have we achieved since COP17?
Let me say, I think there's a lot of expectations by different people expecting different things. What are we looking for? Maybe it's the first thing that we must clarify. COP17 that's set in Durban here on the African soil has actually brought about very important topics that are being discussed now in Paris. And remember when we came to Cape Durban in South Africa, there were 3 serious political questions, heavy, that had to be resolved. Number 1 was the issue of Kyoto Protocol,
yes.
Whether it's coming to an end, and therefore what happens to the rules-based system, the only one that we had, that we still have at the moment. So it was renewed in Durban. We had to say, what do we do about the actions, every country working together to build on actions by all parties, not only the Kyoto Protocol signatories. And that was agreed upon here. Those who would be under the convention and under the Kyoto Protocol. That decision was made here, so that there's no gap up until 2020 when the agreement would be applicable. The third issue was an agreement, a decision to negotiate for a period of 4 years, a finalization of an agreement that's a legally binding or of an instrument of some with legal force or a protocol, whatever we call it. In the final analysis, it's going to be that every party is actually bound to act on that agreement. So that decision was taken here. Now, people expect sometimes that in a period of 4 years, some success in relation to reduction and actual reduction of carbon emission would have happened. That's probably why people are saying, you've been talking. Lest do they actually figure out that, in fact, we had set ourselves a period of 4 years to negotiate this agreement.
Right.
So every year, incrementally, there were certain successes that were reached and made. Let me start with the first success. After Durban, we went to Qatar. Qatar actually put into mechanism and into place action all the decisions and all the institutions that we spoke about, the Green Climate Fund, the Adaptation Fund, all the boards in place. They needed to be put in place, and including the Kyoto Protocol that had to be signed for, because parties had now to be signatories, deposit their willingness and mandate from their countries. So that was done in Qatar. And the beginning of opening up of other legs, like for instance your loss and damage, which is very critical an area of work for the small islands, because the islands, we must recognize also that climate change impacts are already here with us. Yeah. There are some islands that are saying disappearing, we are disappearing, and therefore,
Minister, I need to. Time's against us, unfortunately. Yeah. But from a South African point of view, I saw a stat the other day that South Africa's emissions at the moment are 2% of the top 5 combined. So China, India, the US, a couple of others, Japan. There is an argument that yes, it's important, but South Africa as a country has a lot of other priorities: poverty, growth, and so on. And seeing that our total contribution is relatively small, would it not be better to just put this on hold for the moment and spend the money that we were going to spend on carbon emissions, restricting them, on other things?
No, it's not going to help, because every party, you can imagine, then the talks will not be successful. Because everybody then expects that even South Africa must do something. Where the last count we took were number 12 emitters of the world. So we have to actually, as a responsible citizen, show that we are actually doing something.
And have we improved?
We have improved. We have improved. The report that we submitted last year, remember there are reports that get submitted biannually. So the report that we submitted last year does, in fact, show that we have stayed within the band which we have actually put ourselves to be our long-term trajectory of reduction of carbon emission. We have not gone above. So we could have gone above, because we are indeed challenged with poverty, with job creation and all those things. We have a shortage of energy, by the way. Still with that, we did very well. So yes, we are saying, as a responsible citizen, we'll act, but we'll act within our means and given national circumstances.
Minister, let's come to another local issue, and that's of the rhinos. We've been seeing a lot of issues around legislation perhaps being under review. Just give us a sense of what's the latest thinking around that, and where we are as a country with regards to rhino poaching.
Just very quickly, we are losing rhino, and we've been losing rhino probably up until now of late, where we're beginning to catch people like ants, maybe even flies, because we're really dealing blow on those who are poaching. But yes, last year, 215, it's a lot in a year. There has been a bit of stagnation, but it's a lot. It's also because we think that we are a country with the highest number of rhino. So our conservation success has made us a target, unfortunately. We're followed by Namibia with just under 3,000 of the black and white rhino. So yes, they're going, but we are fighting. We're not relenting. We're really doing all in our power we can.
Are we winning, I suppose, is the question.
We're beginning to win, because you see, the insurgents that they move in threes, in groups of threes. We sometimes actually, on a day, there are 12, not less than 12 insurgents in the park, but we destabilize them. We sit back and think that if we had not caught them, there could have been many rhino
But what about the markets where the demand is originating from? What have our lobbying and advocacy efforts been like today to try and sensitize those markets, to also put out campaigns that will decrease demand?
It's a very, very important point you're mentioning. Here in South Africa, the Vietnamese have been 3 times the young generation, by the way, who probably do not even believe that there's some magic in rhino horn. They've been here 3 times. They went back home. They are tweeting. They're doing whatever. They're talking to their nation just on demand reduction issues. So we are hard at work in relation to that. But you know, this is a very, very difficult. It's because it's an entrenched issue, very deeply entrenched in the older society. I mean, the size, the ages of mine and even upper. So it's very difficult to outroot that now. We're probably going to win with next generations to come. But we are not relenting. Even there we're working. We've got memorandum of understanding with different countries. We've signed them. We're acting. I'm on my way to Vietnam early January. We're arresting people. We're working with our police, with our the criminal justice system to get higher sentences, harsher sentences and all that.
Apparently you've added to your family.
Yes, I have adopted a rhino. The name is Edna. That's a mother who was adopted by President Zuma when he was in Kruger National Park recently, put in a boma, taking care of other younger orphans. Because when sometimes people kill these rhinos, they don't look at the babies. So there are 4 babies who are in a boma right now. I've adopted this Edna and took Edna into the boma to bring up these other young ones, because they need a mother. They are just like human beings. Especially with elephants, they need both parents. But with rhino, they can do with a mother. Well, so that mother is there. That's
a beautiful story. And perhaps another beautiful story, Minister, is that we know tomorrow that South Africans and the world will be remembering Tatu Mandela and his legacy. Perhaps if you could just share with us if you had a personal relationship with him and what you'll remember him for tomorrow.
Oh yes, there are so many things really to remember about Tata, good and bad, by the way.
Shall we start with the bad?
The bad things is what I hear. You know, when in South Africa we probably could have had a very, very bad situation. It's bad for people who are, and were on my side and on the other side of the army, then Mkhonto weSizwe. When Mandela said, stop, we're now laying arms, and they said, no. And people were angry. We were saying, but what does he say? You know, that kind of a thing. At the time, we were very angry with him. And yet, we didn't know that this is actually bringing us very good results. Yeah, that's a part of where we're saying this man is bad, man. Can't be good news, this. But yes, the good news is that he's been a father to all of us. I mean, I actually have a feeling sometimes that we sit here in South Africa, we underestimate the way the world loved that man and cherished him. You go to any other country, America or whatever, you feel that they respected him so much. He brought us the real South Africa and respect by the whole world. The reason why South Africa is so respected today, we believe it's because of the way we had done things. They say you have been able to speak across tables and are now able to live together. Yeah. And today we are really being called by many nations to come and broker their sadness and their...
I mean, he had his pride, but everyone knew he was not in it for himself.
Yes.
He was, and everyone knew
Indeed.
that. His enemies, his friends knew that. What about that discussion? I heard a brilliant discussion on Kaya FM the other evening in response to Julius Malema's comments about Mandela, in effect, selling out at the time. Yes. And of course, a huge debate came on saying, well, it was a negotiated settlement. It wasn't a sellout. But it's interesting how the fault lines in our politics open quite
sometimes
quickly.
Shift. Sometimes it's because people may have been hibernating a little when things were happening. Sometimes a little bit not informed at the time. I mean, you keep on hearing that he sold out, he did whatever, what you were saying. The reality is that we needed that settlement. And there was going to be a post-South Africa as we have it now. And in the post-South Africa, we've got to hold hands and say, how do we share in the wealth of this country together? So we can't blame him for what he did. We must blame ourselves for inability now to be able to open up the opportunities and share.
And he was voted and supported. I mean, it wasn't like he was on his own.
Indeed. All of us, he was never on his own. In fact, he has always recognized that he is not a human. Mandela would never, Tata Mandiba would never say I. He had no word called I. Wherever he spoke, he says we.
Minister, as a final question, I want to extend the insight you've given us about the future. Are you confident that the South Africa of tomorrow that we're going to be handing over to generations to come is in safe hands?
I think it is very much in safe hands. It's intact. I mean, we wouldn't be having investments like this. A country that's torn apart doesn't have these many investments. People just come in and say, hey, it's hot. We come out. We are a stable country. The sooner we believe in ourselves, the better. And then focus and actually develop our own country. Communication is important because we've got to let one another know where we are going, where we are headed to.
Well, we've got to thank the Minister and her extended family. Pass our regards to Edna and her children.
I'm imagining the Minister with a bottle of milk.
Yes.
A big thank you to the Environmental Affairs Minister, Edna Molewa.